Hello, all. Again, this is Dr. Breville. We're going to do a quick introduction to echocardiography. I am joined by
Dr. Chris Hannison, again, fourth year resident at Kings County, emergency medicine resident at Kings County in SUNY Downstate.
And Gonzalo Paz-Solden. I'm a third year medical student at Downstate.
So this module is made to introduce first year medical students to echocardiography, or ultrasound of the heart. So in this module, we'll be identifying cardiac anatomy using echo. This will include looking at the four chambers of the heart, specifically the apical four-chamber and the peristernal long-axis views, to identify mitral and aortic valves on an echo. We'll also talk about the mechanisms that generate normal heart sounds in the physical exam, as well as describing the blood flow between cardiac chambers. This is meant to be an introductory video. Don't think that you need to know everything that is mentioned in detail. Ultrasound is a complicated imaging modality that can sometimes be unintuitive to new medical students. And at the end of this module, we hope that you'll have a very basic understanding of how ultrasound can be used to look at the heart. So there's actually a couple good ways to look at the heart using an ultrasound machine. These different angles or views can help clinicians look at specific parts of the heart. The apical four-chamber is taken at the position indicated by the yellow square. This view is preferred for many because it offers a good view of all four chambers of the heart. The peristernal views are taken from the position indicated by the green square. There are two peristernal views that can be obtained depending on the orientation of the probe. The peristernal long axis view looks at the heart lengthwise and is used to look at the left ventricle, aorta, mitral valve, and intraventricular septum. The peristernal short axis view looks at the heart crosswise and focuses on obtaining an image of the left ventricle in a circular pattern to look closely at the chamber size and left ventricular wall. Lastly, the subxi view is taken from the position indicated by the red square. This view is good for looking at structures at the bottom of the heart, including the right heart and fluid around the heart. In this module, we'll be focusing on the apical four-chamber and the peristernal long axis views. Just keep in mind that these are not the only views that exist.
All right, so here's an apical four-chamber view. We're looking at, it's kind of counterintuitive, but we're looking on the left side of the heart on the right side of the screen. So here we're looking at the left atrium on the bottom right, the mitral valve, which is used to separate flow from the left atrium and the left ventricle, the septum, which is in between the left ventricle and right ventricle, again, with the right ventricle and right atrium being separated by the tricuspid valve. Again, take-home points is that the atrium and ventricles need to be separated by valves, and the opening and closing of those valves make sure blood flows in the right direction during the cardiac cycle. And we're going to demonstrate this with a live video of an apical four-chamber view. So as we see here, this is the normal cardiac cycle. We're seeing opening and closing of the valves, and I'm going to slow this down to show you guys what's happening during this cycle. So here we're seeing that the valves are closed. Now they're opening. So this actually is what we call diastole. This is relaxation of the ventricles. Basically, it's blood going from the atria to the ventricles, and I'll explain what happens after. So during systole, when you see the valves close, that means the blood from the right side of the heart is going to the pulmonary vasculature so they can receive oxygen from the lungs. When the left ventricle squeezes, we're actually saying the oxygenated blood go to the aorta to oxygenate the tissues and the brain. And so during your cardiac ultrasound or your physical examination time, you're learning about the different heart sounds. S1, or the lub, is closure of the tricuspid on the left side of your screen, but in the right side of the heart, and the mitral valve, again on the right side of the screen, but in the left side of the heart. And that creates what we call the S1. The S2 is caused by the closing of the pulmonic and aortic valves, but we don't get to see those in this view, but we will see them in the next view of the heart. So the next view, this is actually the parasternal long axis view. And in this view, we're seeing, towards the top of the screen, we're seeing the right ventricle, the right ventricular outflow tract, being the aorta. To the left of that, the aortic valve and the left ventricle. Between the left ventricle and the left atrium, you actually had this demonstrated on the last slide, is the mitral valve. So actually during this part of the cardiac cycle, we're actually seeing the function of the valves, right? They're meant to separate the chambers and make sure that blood's going in the right direction. So this is actually diastole, where blood is going from the left atrium, from the lungs. This is oxygenated blood going from the left atrium to the left ventricle. And blood is meant to pool here, and during systole, we're going to see that blood go from the left atrium out of the aortic valve into the aorta to oxygenate your body. And we're going to see this in action. Great. So here, this is again the parasternal short axis, and what we're seeing here, this is diastole. So the left ventricle is relaxing, and oxygenated blood from the lungs is going from the left atrium to the, from the left atrium to the left ventricle. And what we're going to see here, and I'm going to stress this one more time, is during early systole, in which blood is going to go from the left ventricle out from the through the aortic valve, through the aorta to your body, we have a phenomenon called isovolumetric contraction. We're seeing a phase in which both the mitral valve and the aortic valve are closed. So there, you're seeing early systole. You're seeing the aortic valve close. This is from isovolumetric contraction to systole, right? We're seeing the aortic valve open now, so blood is going from the left ventricle to the rest of the body via the aorta. And now both valves are closed, and we're going to see diastole, where the left ventricle is relaxing and blood again is flowing from the left atrium to the left ventricle to be circulated through the body. Another example of isovolumetric contraction. And again, we're seeing another example of systole where the aortic valve is open. So diastole, mitral valve open, systole, aortic valve open, mitral valve closed, with isovolumetric contraction being in between the two processes.
So that may have seemed like a lot of information, but again, this is just an introductory video, and we hope that you take these few things away from the video. First, there are 4 views on echocardiography: parasternal long, parasternal short, apical forechamber, and subxiphoid. 2, S1 is the closure of the mitral and tricuspid valves, and S2 is the sound produced by the closure of the aortic and pulmonic valves. And finally, diastole occurs when the mitral and tricuspid valves are open. Systole occurs when they are closed. We hope that you enjoyed your introduction to echocardiography video. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Dr. Breville, Dr. Hannison, or myself. We look forward to working with you on future ultrasound modules.